Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special candidate in the building.
Yes, sir.
Former governor of, I always say this wrong, Massachusetts. I just can't say Massachusetts. I don't know what it is. But 2020 presidential candidate,
say it the way
Deval
Barack Obama
Patrick.
says it.
Yeah, Massachusetts. I just can't say
You call him a
it.
devil? You just said devil
I said
Patrick.
Deval Patrick.
No, you said devil.
Oh, I meant Deval
Jesus
Patrick.
All right,
Christ.
retake,
Please.
cut, start over.
Deval Patrick. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, DJ. Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
Everybody wants to know why, did you jump in the race so late? 2 months before Iowa. Why now?
Well, I was ready to go. First of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for joining us.
And although I was told Angela was going to be here, and I'm bringing this to my agent, I just want you to know.
Okay.
I expect different circumstances when the representations are made. I expect them to be kept.
She's on
got you.
vacation
I got
right
you.
now. She's on a beach somewhere. She's enjoying herself.
God bless her. Listen, I was ready to go about a year or so ago. We were 2 or 3 weeks from a formal announcement, and my wife Diane was diagnosed with uterine cancer,
Oh, sorry to hear
and
that.
she's cancer-free now.
Beautiful.
nice.
We
Beautiful.
celebrated 35 years in May. She's cancer-free.
Right.
Praise God. And I've been watching the field. A bunch of my friends are in it. As a Democrat, I am proud of the fact that we have so much talent in the field. But a lot of the stuff that folks are talking about, the reforms that are so important, folks have plans. I have results. These are things we actually worked on in Massachusetts, and I've worked on in my private life as well. And I think also we aren't really talking enough about how to expand the pie so that folks have more of a chance to have a stake in it. And in particular around African Americans, how we have the opportunity to own stuff. So there's some, I think, and I say this respectful of the other candidates, genuinely. No one else has the range of life and leadership experience that I do. And I want to be able to offer that in this cycle.
Why are Democrats so scared to speak specifically about what they would do for black people?
Do you sense that we are?
Hell
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you want me to speak to it?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, that we're going to be rolling out our policies in sort of groups of agenda because most people live at the intersection of policy, not in the, sort of policy silos. So we're going to be talking about an opportunity agenda, which is about economic growth, a reform agenda about some of the big systems that we need to change, healthcare, criminal justice, and so forth, a democracy agenda about all the ways in which we have, twisted and turned and played with our democracy from, hyperpartisan gerrymandering and money and vote suppression and purging so we basically don't get democratic outcomes. And then a foreign policy agenda. And within the opportunity agenda, among the things we're going to be talking about is how we focus in on driving closing of the achievement gaps in schools, where a lot of our kids are stuck. Poor kids, kids with special needs. When we talk about health care, we're going to be talking about not just physical care, but mental health care, which is a huge, huge issue, something that we've experienced in our own families, and many, many families do, and it's silent. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurial activity and the importance of having access to mentorship, to coaching, and to capital. And by that, I don't just mean loans. I mean actual investment capital, so that you can start up your own business and develop independence and begin to build some generational wealth. So those are, and I should also mention within the education frame, how do we think about HBCUs, and in particular, should we be thinking about trying to endow HBCUs so they're not quite so subject to the twists and turns of the annual federal budget?
Yeah,
What
you're right.
makes you different? I want to know what makes you different. The reason I say that is, we've had I would say most of the candidates up here. And all of them to me sound like they're selling a car. They all say the same thing. Has great, it drives fast. It's reliable. The tires are good. And it gets to the point where, like, I'm hearing the same story. What makes you different from hearing that same story over and over again?
Well, a couple things. The first thing I think is that, a lot of folks are talking about what they will do. I'm telling you what I have done. In Massachusetts, which, by the way, was the first office I ever ran for, was the office of governor, and I ran at the grassroots for both tactical reasons and philosophical reasons. I ran at the grassroots because people they feel unseen and unheard the way we did growing up on the south side of Chicago, and inviting people to check back in and take responsibility and in fact see their power in shaping the future of their own government was an important thing to me, and it was the only way I was going to be able to break in. And then 15 minutes after I won, the bottom fell out of the global economy. So we invested time, ideas, money. We collaborated with other sectors. We brought in voices that weren't being heard, that had helped me win, but then needed to help me govern. And I'm proud to say that after 2 terms, we are number 1 in America in student achievement and healthcare coverage. 98.4% of our residents have healthcare today. In energy efficiency, in entrepreneurial activity, in veteran services, I can go on. And we did it with responsible budgets, the highest bond rating in our history, and a 25-year employment high. We didn't get everything right, but a lot of the stuff folks are talking about, I've done. And I think we have an opportunity. We're in a fragile time. I'm not saying anything you don't know.
Fragile might be an understatement.
Yeah, well, I'm
fragile,
I'm
volatile,
being,
toxic.
We're people are mad.
Yeah,
and I understand that, right? I mean, I don't know how much you know about my background, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago a lot of that time on public assistance. I lived with my mother and my
single
sister.
mother.
Grandparents, multi-generational household, relatives who came and went, right? I shared one of those 2 bedrooms in our grandparents' 2-bedroom tenement with my mother and sister and a set of bunk beds. So you go from the top bunk to the bottom bunk to the floor every third night on the floor. I've been to and I went to big, overcrowded, under-resourced, sometimes violent public schools. But we had a very strong sense of community, right? Because that was a time when every child was under the jurisdiction of every single adult on the block. You messed up down the street in front of Ms. Jones, she'd go upside your head as if you were hers, and then she'd call home, so you got it 2 times. And I think what those adults were trying to teach us is that membership in community is understanding you actually have a stake in your neighbor, just as your neighbor does in you. You got to pay attention to that. And I think there's a way in which the things you hear nationally about, how the economy just kind of gets up and moves on and kicks people, whole communities to the curb, how, opioids come in to fill that void. I mean, that was growing up on the south side of Chicago. And I can ask myself, and sometimes do, how come, opioids were a problem when I was growing up? They're an issue now. When they get to the suburbs, I can be angry about that, or I can see that as an opportunity, frankly, for us to solve problems across a whole bunch of different communities in a way that unites us. So I think being reminded as I grew up, and I had this incredible access to the American dream, that there were plenty of other kids just as ambitious. Just as determined, just as capable, who didn't get that break, and that it's been getting harder and harder to have that break for more and more people. I shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines at a time like this.
Why, when you were on the sidelines, why not just back one of the black candidates that was already running, like Senator Booker or Senator Harris? Why not just put full support behind them instead of getting in the race? You didn't think they had what it took?
They are, say it again?
You didn't think they had what it took?
Look, they're friends of mine. I respect them both. I know Corey a little bit better, but I know Kamala too. And they both bring a lot to public life and have brought a lot to this race. But the actual business of making change that lasts, and this is back to DJ's point about what people say. The actual business of bringing change that lasts means you got to bring in other voices. You got to bring in people sometimes who don't agree with you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. We started on a journey of criminal justice reform.
Mm-hmm.
We had an agenda, around mandatory minimums and trying to bring the whole concept of rehabilitation into jails and prisons. And one of the things we kept hearing, because I was out, just trying to be with people, just trying to bring I guess I should frame it, I should start it this way by saying I'm not that interested in abstract policy. I'm interested in policy where it actually touches people, where it gets right down to how you live your life and how it changes, how it matters, I think. And people kept saying, I'm out now, but because of it's great you're trying to change the sentencing standards and so forth, but I can't get a job. And the reason I can't get a job is not just because of the recession. That's its own problem. But because I have to go in and check a box on my on the application that says I have a record, and then the employer doesn't look any further than that. So you got to ban the box. We have
still didn't answer why you didn't support them, though.
Well, I'm coming. I'm
okay.
talking. I did answer.
Because you're doing the politician thing.
No, I'm not. I answered it.
Yeah.
You're doing the voter thing and not listening to my answer.
Okay.
All of my answers.
I'm trying to get it.
I think it's sound bites. So
right.
Be patient with me. I'm just talking about. I guess the simple answer is I'm talking about getting down to where it actually matters, actually making change that matters, and why I think it matters. And what I'm trying to say is I've had some experience at that, and differently, and I think more broadly than some of the other candidates.
What was your
Gotcha.
relationship with Barack Obama, President Obama?
I've known Barack Obama, maybe 15 years before he ran for anything.
Mm-hmm.
He was practicing civil rights in Chicago, civil rights law, voting rights mainly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was head of the civil rights division in the first term of the Clinton administration.
Mm-hmm.
And the White House counsel at the time, and Charlamagne, I am going to come back to my story in a minute.
Okay.
He was practicing in Chicago. I was in D.C., and the then White House counsel, who was from Chicago, said, "You know what? There's a guy in Chicago you should know. He reminds me of you. You remind me of him. And his name is Barack Obama." And I said, "I've heard that name."
Did a white guy say that or a black
Yes,
guy say that?
a white guy.
All black people look like.
All black
Okay.
people
No,
look
no, no.
alike.
He didn't. No. He didn't
All
say
black
we
people
looked alike.
Oh,
He said that we that he reminds me. It wasn't about how we looked. At least that's not how I heard it.
okay.
And so the next time I was in Chicago, I looked him up, and we had a cup of coffee. And you've met him.
No,
I
I
haven't
haven't.
met him yet.
Oh,
He
you
hasn't
gotta-
met me.
I've
you
met
gotta
the
get
first
him in
lady.
here.
We're
Never met-
trying.
Yeah. Well, the first lady. I mean, he like me. He married up.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
But he's amazing and very compelling. And we stayed in touch. And then he called me when he ran for state senate. And I think he had run and lost for the Congress at that point. And we stayed in, as I said, we stayed in touch. I was excited about that race. I helped a little bit in his run for the United States Senate. And actually, I went down to see him. He was moving into his office in the basement of the Senate office building, and I said, "Senator, I'm proud you're here. I'm excited for you." I said, "You know what? I'm thinking about running for governor." And he said, "Huh?" He said, "How much money do you have?" I said, "None." He said, "What kind of organization you got?" I said, "I don't have one yet." He said, "What's your name recognition in Massachusetts?" I said 1%, 2% on the days when we're bragging. And he said, "Well, I'm in."
Mm-hmm.
He was incredibly helpful to me when I ran. I was all in when he ran for president, and we sort of yinned and yanged over back and forth over the course of our political careers.
What do you say about you running now? Did you reach out
No,
to Vice Counsel?
I talked to him a lot, especially before we were ready to go and stopped. He's very clear-eyed about politics, about the cruelty of it, about how heavy the lift is under any circumstance. Start 10 years before, and it's still hard, and encouraging. He has a relationship with many of the other candidates, in particular the vice president. as you
Which
can
I don't
imagine.
understand why he ever made Joe Biden his vice president. When I look at the
Well, you have to
88
ask him that.
Yeah, when I look at the 88 crack laws and the 94 crime bill and the things he said about Barack, being bright, articulate, and clean, first African American he's ever met that's bright, articulate, and clean. I'm like, how did we miss all that the first time around when he ran, when he was Obama's VP?
Yeah, I mean, look, politics is a peculiar world.
Mm-hmm.
When I was nominated to the Civil Rights Division, the chair of the Judiciary Committee was Joe Biden, and he was gracious and encouraged his colleagues. I even got Strom Thurmond's support.
Oh my God!
I know.
Y'all from South Carolina. So
I know.
I know all about that white devil.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
He is what he is. We can't act like he was a good guy.
But just back to Barack Obama. He was, I think, an amazing president. But nobody. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. I don't think any of us in here thought we had reached the promised land just by virtue of his election. I don't think he did.
I did.
You did?
I drank the Kool-Aid. I did. I really thought we was in a post-racial society.
You did?
Yeah, because, if you just look at the history of America and for them to elect a black president, you had to think to yourself, like, wow, things have really changed. All the old racists are dying. It's a new generation. But 45 reminded us, nah,
not
it's the same old America.
Can I just say, I think all the racists voted for 45, but not all the people who voted for 45 are racist.
Yeah, I agree.
As a friend of mine puts it.
Do you know 45? Do you know Trump?
I have met him once.
Okay.
At a funeral of a mutual friend.
Okay.
Y'all got mutual friends?
Well, we have. It was at Robert Kraft's late wife's.
Got
funeral.
you.
And I knew her well. She was an amazing person. What I was going to say is that I remember saying to the folks who were saying at the time, this is a post-racial society, I said, wait till the first time the president and the first lady get off of Air Force One on vacation. On vacation. Every president has done it. Mm-hmm. Wait till the first time they get off first Air Force One on vacation, and then folks will say, what the heck is he? Who does he think he is? We saw during the transition when we were there were a handful of governors, 5 of us, I think, who were working on the stimulus bill. Because remember, we were in economic freefall at that point, and trying to develop something that we could that would be in place on the day he took office, that would relieve the short-term suffering of the people who were the hardest hit. And the administration was working with the Congress, which was then controlled in both the House and the Senate, if you remember, by Democrats. And sometime I'll tell you the story about what it was like to develop it all. But the quid pro, the president wanted his first bill to be bipartisan. And the price the Republicans asked for was to include tax cuts in the bill. Now, all of the economists, Republican and Democratic, said there's nothing stimulative about tax cuts. It won't help. But that was the deal in order to get their vote. And then it went to the floor, and not a single Republican voted for it. Not one. And I said, now, take a look and a lesson. You're gonna have to bring out your little South Side in order to govern, because they are just. This is not about trying to save the nation.
No.
It's about trying to damage you and make you fail.
And you see that now. Trump has reversed damn near everything that Barack Obama implemented.
Whether it was he thinks it was prudent or not. I mean, it was so interesting how he walked away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was on the table at the time, and then eventually came back around and he said something about containing or competing with China, and a strategy for that sounded a lot like the TPP. And somebody said, that sounds a lot like the TPP, and he stopped talking about it again after that. So,
why does Biden have so much support with older black voters, you think?
I think he's familiar. If you're talking about support, Charlemagne, I think most people are referring to polling.
His poll numbers, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the polling today is mostly about name recognition. folks don't feel like they have don't yet feel like they have an alternative that they know as well. I got to earn that place, and I understand that, and that's what I'm trying to do.
How do you expect to earn that? Because like as you can see with Senator Booker, Senator Harris, being black isn't enough just to get black voters.
No, it never was.
Yeah, so how do you?
It never was. I mean, people who presume that, I think, insult us.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say us, I don't mean just the candidates. I mean black people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was with President Obama for a second, meaning that he was more than qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But when it looked like he had a chance,
Mm-hmm.
he had
all
black
supported.
people that never
Absolutely.
voted until
Mm-hmm.
Barack. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, he got a chance?
Yeah.
Oh, rappers putting him in songs? They
Yeah.
making songs about him? Like,
Yeah.
oh, he really a brother? Seem
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
got a black wife?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on him. Seriously.
No. I mean, if you look at just the voting sequence,
Mhm.
he didn't catch on in South Carolina until he won Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What's that tell you? How come we keep waiting for other people to give us permission?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was reality then. It may be now. But we don't need anybody's permission. All I'm saying is, I'm not presuming that I'm entitled to anybody's vote. You know, I think in 2016, the Democratic nominee seemed to presume that Michigan, for example, was going to show up without going to Michigan to ask.
Yeah, that was crazy.
You got to go ask,
Yeah.
right? You can't take people know when they're taken for granted, don't you think? I mean, they
100%.
they feel that.
That's how black people feel right now when it comes to the Democratic Party. We simply feel like Democrats have not done enough for us. So what are you going to give us in exchange for our votes? We're not just running out and voting for you, especially when you try to make it out of fear. Like, oh, you got to vote. Like,
No.
I'm not
Listen,
doing it.
beyond this president, who I think is more than anything, I mean, I think he's made a lot of stuff worse, but he has exposed some unfinished business in the country. Some of it is about our racial and ethnic unease, but even more broadly than that, he's exposed the truth about the economy, how the so-called economic indicators don't tell the whole story, right? Inflation is low, we are told, so long as you don't count the cost of education, healthcare, and housing, right? The very things that enable you to lift yourself onto a path of economic mobility. Unemployment is low, so long as you count both or all three of the minimum wage jobs you have. I mean, it's the way people actually live their lives is different than the statistics. And I think that excuse me, DJ, I just want to finish this thought, that the hardest thing right now, to your point about cynicism about the party or politics, frankly, is to persuade people to take a chance on their own aspirations, not the candidate or the party, their own aspirations.
You mean vote your interest.
Vote your interest, because they need to know it's actually going to happen and not be promised. Which is why I keep coming back to, among the reasons I keep coming back to, the things we were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the stuff we're talking about, but the things we were able to do. And don't get me wrong, we didn't get everything right. But I think we got a lot that is indicative in a national model on how we can deliver for the whole country.
So what do you stand? What do you stand on? So for people who don't know who you are, because you're pretty new to a lot of people, what do you stand on when it comes to the housing crisis and black people being able to afford houses and being able to get loans from banks? And how do you stand on marijuana and drugs? And how do you stand on guns? What on those basis things? What do you stand on as far as that and colleges, et cetera?
Okay, so you have to.
What do you want to start with?
Yeah, we can start with
What's
anyone.
your agenda?
We start
basically,
with.
what it asks.
Let's start with
okay.
black people getting houses and being able to get loans to get businesses.
Right. So I think the issue around home ownership is in part to do with how banks behave.
Mm-hmm.
The Community Reinvestment Act was a pretty good idea. It's not. It doesn't really have enforcement teeth.
Right.
Today, it needs to. But the ability to buy a house is not all about getting loans. It's also about being able to get the equity so you can have you can get a stake in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we have the loan to value rules that we do, that's going to be hard for a whole lot of people. And the same thing is true, by the way, for business creation.
Mm-hmm.
It's capital. It's not just the loans. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
But it's capital. And I think there's work we can do, and there are proposals you will see in our economic agenda about making capital available in collaboration with the private sector, so that people can get a stake. There's some wonderful strategies that I've been looking at in my private sector work for how, when gentrification comes to neighborhoods, the folks in those neighborhoods who are living there right now and worried about the upward pressure on their rents, which is real, have a stake in the property values that are going up, in the pressure that's being created by all this new investment. You can see this right now on the south side of Chicago, where the Obama Presidential Center is going. I was on that board. Some really creative stuff that can happen in collaboration with the private sector. So that's on the first you asked. You asked about guns.
With that, I mean, it sounds good, but if you give people loans or the capital and they're charging them 8% loans, that doesn't help. You know what I mean? It has to be some type of way where you give people and allow them to be able to move into a home with, if they don't have any money, no money down.
Well, that's what
or less than 3% down.
This is exactly what I was talking about the importance of having an equity stake.
Correct.
Shared equity. By the way, you know how many universities make it possible for these young faculty members to come and join their faculty? By sharing in the equity of property that's in the expensive neighborhoods around that university. Well, government can do that. It's not a lot of money at the end of the day, especially if you think about the ways in which folks have been excluded from the wealth creation opportunity of owning a home by policies that go back generations, right? So why shouldn't government have a stake?
I mean, government got the land, they got the houses, they own so much of the foreclosed properties. It's not on tax rolls.
Well, that's
a lot of times
that
you
I
give it
think.
to those people.
So this is exactly the strategy in Chicago that I was talking about. I think is. I mean, I go out to my old neighborhood. There are all these vacant lots now.
Yep.
And a lot of them are on account of tax takings, and the city owns them. Land banks, the city and the county have land banks. A cooperation with the federal government kind of amp that up so that folks in the communities have a stake, and the folks who want to, black people who want to come back into the communities and own. And it's not that I'm rent is fine if you can swing it, but
Right.
it's the wealth creation, I think.
That's correct.
It's having a stake.
But you got to
So why haven't y'all created that wealth in Chicago? It always baffles me when I see brothers like yourself, President Obama. Y'all rep Chicago, but Chicago's so fucked up. Why is that?
You know what I was just saying is that I was on the board of the foundation of the Obama Foundations until I stepped out to run. And one of the things I was working on, and that they are still working on, is exactly this kind of thing. Because the pressure that's created, the excitement created by the library being on the South Side is terrific. But the economic pressure is also real.
Yeah,
and there's real opportunity there.
That's what leads to the crime. That's what leads to the violence. These kids are just trying to survive. They can't get jobs. The only thing that they got access to is guns and is drugs. So it's just like, y'all have to start cleaning up your own backyard, you think?
But not only that, not only giving them properties, it's okay to give somebody a property, but if you don't teach them how to maintain it and how to fix it up,
that's right.
It goes back to where it was. Because a lot of times we don't know how to invest. We don't know how to take care of a house or things because most of us never had it.
And financial literacy, huge. Yep.
When you saw Trump's tweets about sending the National Guard in Chicago to fix Chicago, what did that mean? How'd that make you feel?
My. I remember the National Guard in Chicago after the '68 riots, the Woodlawn riots. That was my neighborhood. I don't know what to say about
Do you think you and President Obama, guys like that, have dropped the ball in Chicago?
Well, I think Chicago needs a lot of attention.
Had a president from there.
Well, but I'm not going to dish on the president. I can tell you, I think that Chicago, like a lot of other cities, have communities that are feeling exactly what I'm hearing in your question, which is that we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And that's a frustration I understand. I think that's one of the reasons why it is possible we could I think it's one of the reasons why this election is so critical. Let me put it that way.
He has a leave soon, Charlamagne, so if you got another.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm all right. I think it's one of the reasons why this election is so critical. It's one of the reasons why the gratitude I feel having had the life I had motivates me to be in right now. And I think that there are collaborations and innovations we need to try, even if they don't work the first time. Mm-hmm. We got to raise our appetite for trying new stuff. That is a bigger challenge than you might think in politics, because generally, if you want innovation, you have to raise your tolerance for failure, and politics punishes failure. But we need to be trying lots of different things and different things in different communities, because the answer is going to vary depending on the community, and that's something else I understand from my work in public life and in private life.
You can see how black people have felt forgotten, though.
Of course,
our communities are the worst.
Yeah.
Education systems in these communities are the worst. And you have all of these black politicians asking for our vote, but it's like nobody is directing resources directly to black communities.
Can I just say, as governor of Massachusetts, I did that. That's what I'm talking about. I wasn't just about policy pronouncements. It was about delivering. And I want to be clear, as I said earlier, we didn't get it all right. Mm-hmm. But the work on the Achievement Gap Act, for example, which I think was one of our greatest educational accomplishments, was about getting at the fact that we were number one in student achievement overall did not mean we were not leaving children behind. And a lot of those children were our children. Mm-hmm. And frankly, all of the children we were leaving behind were our children. They weren't all black children, but they're ours. Back to this idea about what it means to be a community, mm-hmm. right? And so it was an investment of time and ideas and money and results that we got. There's a wonderful school called the Orchard Garden School that in Boston that was one of the, viewed as one of the worst in the city, that went in a little bit more than a year using all these new tools from the Achievement Gap Act to being one of the best in the state. It can be done. It's not, but it's not the same solution everywhere. It's some resources and some accountability that let the folks on the ground do what they feel is in the best interest of those children to move their lives and that community forward. And the same was true around gun legislation or gun safety legislation or criminal justice reform, about bringing in appointees, about who sits on the bench. The first African-American Chief Justice of our highest court, the first African-American woman on our highest court. The pipeline was so much richer. The appointees at the senior level and throughout the administration at 40% and 50% ahead of my predecessors. The amount of contracting that we did. It's the business creation that I think we need to be, small, medium, and large. Mm-hmm. That I think we need to be more on point on, and will be if I'm president.
Did you know it was going to be rough when you had the event at Morehouse and nobody showed up?
We canceled the event at Morehouse.
Yeah, because nobody showed up.
It was no, that's not why we canceled it. No, that's no. We had a great launch week, and the team tried to do one thing too many. We were trying to get home, and when we just got signals crossed. The president of Morehouse is an old friend. I'm looking forward to being back there. I have an honorary degree from Morehouse and gave the commencement a couple of years ago. I got to get back.
Oh yeah, I thought they said you canceled it because nobody showed up to it the night of the Atlanta debate.
People say a lot of things. No, but I did apologize for any disrespect because mm-hmm. we had two things happening at the same time. One of which was a flight that I needed to be on, and like I said, team got a little overexcited and ahead of me.
Well, before you go, what's the Deval Patrick value proposition to black voters? Why should black voters rock with Deval Patrick?
Look, we've been waiting a long time in this country and in a lot of individual communities and in a lot of individual lives for prosperity and justice to extend to every corner of the country. That's what I'm about. That's what I think this opportunity presents. And I am very clear that we have to deliver. And so when folks are comparing me to others, look at the folks who compare their rhetoric to my record, and I hope they will also see my heart, because I see and hear and worry about folks who have felt seen, unseen, and unheard for a long time.
Well, we appreciate you for joining us
I
this morning.
appreciate you having me. Thank
And you haven't made the debate yet for December, right?
No.
What do you got to
Have
do?
you seen the debates? I'm not sure that's something I want to do. I mean, I want to qualify.
You gotta do it, yeah.
I want to qualify, but the debates are not the objective. The vote is the objective.
But you got to get in front of the American people so they can see.
That's right. And I think you're going to see we're going to have some interesting, fun alternatives.
So you think the debates are trash?
Look, I think the format is problematic, just as a way to, actually engage with people.
Yeah.
Because you put your ideas out there, but you give people a chance to react to them and
But it's
teach
30
you.
people, and they cutting it down. But then you and Bloomberg jump back in, so you made it more.
Well, don't blame the format on me, man. Come on, that was a problem before I got in. No, but look, they'll change the rules again in January, and we fully expect to be.
I think the rules are terrible because I don't think the DNC is reflecting the people anymore. It's not the party of the people anymore. You got billionaires and no black people.
But as I said, the problem that is part of the problem with the debates. But the other problem with the debates is that the format is not a way to actually tell anybody. I mean, if it's just about a picture, there's a big, diverse field. But if it's actually about trying to inform voters about what you're about,
yeah,
in some, it takes, maybe some people can do it in 30 seconds. But if it's back to the point about where policy matters, it's a conversation,
Right.
And I just want to finish. I know my time's up. I just want to finish this maybe stop on this story about the ban the box legislation.
Mm-hmm.
This is to the point about policy that matters, because again, it wasn't my focus, except I kept hearing about it. And we finally got this piece of legislation passed, and we went out to sign the bill in the Roxbury neighborhood in Boston, which is black community, predominantly black community in Boston. At Freedom House, a great big hall, unair conditioned, jammed with people on the hottest day in the history of time. Everybody's sweating, but euphoric because it's folks have been waiting a long time. We signed the bill. I'm on my way out. This guy hands me his cell phone. He says, "Talk to my friend." And I take the cell phone, and the guy on the other end says, "Governor," he said, "thanks for signing this bill. I know it's going to make a difference in my life." And I said, "I hope it does. Make the most of it." Give the phone back. 4 years later, I'm in the western part of the state for an event. We get there a little early. We stop off at a restaurant downtown to pick up lunch, takeout, and I'm standing there by the sort of hostess desk in the front, and this guy in restaurant togs comes by, and he does a double take, which I always attribute to the fact that I'm taller on TV. And he says, "Are you Governor Patrick?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You remember signing the what's called the Corey reform, the ban the box?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You remember talking to a guy on a cell phone that day?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was that guy." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Yeah, I was in jail when I took that call." He said, "I got out and got this job on account of this law." He said, "I'm the executive chef at this restaurant today." To me, that's where policy matters. Is it actually reaching
The people.
people at the point they need to be reached?
Or
And most people I meet, they're not interested in government solving every problem in their lives. They just want government to help them help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want people to see, to your question earlier, is that I'm thinking all the way down to where the policy touches people.
Right. Well, we appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Deval Patrick, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.